Okay, so why did I show you Battle Belongs? Why did I show you that? Because now we have touched on all of the tricks that generally you're going to see come up in worship music. And this is when things are going to start to click and really make a lot of sense to you, okay? Now, it's really easy to look at a chord chart and be overwhelmed by it and think, "Oh man, there's so many notes and numbers associated with it. How do I know what goes with what?" Well, there is a pattern. I'm going to show it to you right now. Now, we're going to go back to the key of C in order for me to show this to you, okay? This is really cool. So, on your C chord, on your one chord, we're in the key of C, this is the one chord. On your C chord, you can do all of the tricks, okay? The 7 doesn't sound great, but for sometimes you can add that 7 in and it will sound all right, but I wouldn't recommend doing the 7 very much. So the 7, not so much as you're just like experimenting. Maybe throw it in and see if you can find a place for it to work, but don't expect it to work very often, okay? All right, so C add 7, that was the first trick we learned. How about the sus? Well, we already know that the 3/4 suspension will work. We already know that the 4/5 suspension will work, right? We already know that inversions work, okay? Both versions of inversions work. Both versions of inversions, yeah, versions of inversions work. A 2 chord also works. The 1 add 2, okay? So drop the 3rd and put in the 2nd. That sounds really good, okay? So that's pretty much all of the tools that you need. Now, when you're playing, you can create melodies using those tools, okay? So let me just like do a basic rhythm and show you what I'm going to do, okay? So I'm going to play a C chord and I'm going to drop the 5th on the top. I'm going to do 5th on the bottom, 3rd on the top. Suspension, resolve to 3. Suspension again, 2, 3, 5, and 7, 2, 3. Okay, so I'm just pulsing on C and I'm using all of those different things that we talked about, and you can hear how it's kind of like creating a thing. Now, I wouldn't necessarily go boom, pop, boom, pop, boom, pop, boom, pop during a prayer or anything like that, but you can imagine how if I've got a nice pad sound going on, maybe I can pull that up really quick. Let's see, something like... You see how I'm like adding on things, and you can come up with some cool melodies that way. All right. So all that to say, all the tricks you can use on that one chord. Okay. Now let's experiment. The next chord that you'll sometimes see is the 2 chord. Let me go back to my normal piano. All right. For both of your minor chords, your minor 2 chord, adding that 7 is about all I would do. It's enough and it sounds good. I wouldn't try to add a suspension. Okay. Minor 2, add a 7. Minor 6, add a suspension. Okay, because when you try to add a suspension, add a 7, not a suspension. When you try to add a suspension, this is what it sounds. Okay, so in context, if I try to add a suspension, it sounds like you're about to go to a key change. So just be careful with that. But adding a 7 sounds really good. Anytime you want to add a 7, you can do it. Or if you're doing some type of melody line, you can sometimes get away with the 2. I would do a 2 in passing. I wouldn't just land on it all the time. Okay, all right, so we're in C. Minor 7 for the 2 chord, minor 7 for the 6 chord, back to the 1 chord. Let's go to the 4 chord. 4 chord, add 2. Yes, sounds so good. Now you might be wondering, what about a suspension on the 4 chord? Can we do that? It's just so dissonant. Okay, I wouldn't recommend doing that. There might be a context where that will be the right thing, but it just sticks out like a sore thumb. But that 2 really fits. Okay, now where the suspension does shine is on the 5 chord. Okay, your G. But the 2 doesn't. You could maybe do it in passing if you're doing some type of melody, but I would not land on it. Okay, I wouldn't stick it out. I wouldn't draw attention to it if you're doing some type of melody line. Okay, so and 7s. Here comes the 7 on the G. That's kind of, I don't know. It's pretty old school hymny to put a 7 on a 5 chord. Okay, 5, 7. Yeah. Not in most modern worship music, but you will see it in some hymns. Okay, 7 on the 4 chord. Sounds better, but I would still be careful where you use it. And there's a little too much dissonance going on there. So all that to say, there are no like hard and fast rules with music. You want to do something that sounds good, and so you need to experiment with these things. But that being said, knowing what works the best is super helpful. Okay, so minor chords, add a 7. So that's minor 2 and minor 6, you add a 7. 4 chord, add a 2. 5 chord, 3/4 suspension. If you just stick to that and do whatever you want to on the 1 chord, you can come up with some very beautiful things that are going to sound a lot like worship music. Okay? Let me just experiment around. This is not planned. I'm just going to play through some stuff and show you how this works. Okay? I'm going to start on the 1 chord. And 1, 2, 1. 1 over 1 and add 2, and 4 and 2. Back to the 1. Add 2. Again. Land on the 4 chord with a 2. Minor 6, add 7. 5 chord suspension, 1 chord, add 2. See how I did that? So I'm not doing a ton, but on each chord at least once I'm adding in the special thing. Okay? I hope that's helpful. Let's get into inversions next.